It is not just a maritime disaster. It is a question that has never been answered. How could a floating fortress of steel, worth $60 million in cargo, advertised as the pinnacle of modern logistics, collapse into a drifting inferno in mere seconds? Why did a system designed to defy typhoons and rogue waves surrender to a calm, clear night? And more importantly, why did 32 seasoned mariners become the first victims of the very confidence they trusted? But that is only the surface. Behind the moment, the horizon itself caught fire, lies another story less told, but equally dangerous about the condensate, a ghost fuel, bureaucratic paralysis, and a chain of small errors merging into history. Why did it all happen in January 2018? And what actually killed the Sanchi, the collision, the explosion, or the human element? Stay tuned, because the truth about the Sanchi event is unlike any story you know. The East China Sea was not angry on the night of January 6, 2018. It was dangerously calm. The water was a flat obsidian mirror stretching endlessly toward the horizon, reflecting the cold starlight of a winter evening. In this vast, silent theater, the oil tanker Sanchi moved with the arrogance of a king. She was a Panamax-sized titan, 274 meters of painted steel cutting through the darkness. She was not merely a vessel. She was a masterpiece of modern engineering, a floating city designed to conquer the chaotic variables of the ocean. On the bridge, the atmosphere was one of professional boredom, the kind that only comes from absolute confidence. The navigation screens glowed with a soft, reassuring green light, plotting a course that seemed mathematically perfect. The air conditioning hummed a steady lullaby drone, keeping the temperature at a comfortable constant miles away from the freezing winter air outside. The crew of 3230 Iranians and 2 Bangladeshis were settling into the rhythm of the night watch. In the mess hall, the smell of dinner still lingered, a warm scent of spices and tea that made the ship feel less like a machine and more like a home. They were carrying a fortune. The Sanchi was laden with 136,000 tons of condensate. Unlike the heavy black crude oil that coats birds in sticky tar, condensate is the ghost of the petroleum world. It is ultralight, almost colorless, and smells faintly of gasoline. It is valuable, efficient, and prized by the global market. To the crew, it was just cargo, a number on a manifest that translated to paychecks for families waiting back in Tehran. But beneath the polished floorboards of the mess hall, separated by only a few inches of sturdy steel, the liquid cargo shifted silently against the hull, a sleeping dragon waiting for the slightest invitation to wake. Everything was working. The engines beat with a rhythmic, low-frequency thrum that vibrated through the soles of the sailors' shoes, a heartbeat of industrial power. The Automatic Identification System, AIS, broadcasted their position to the world, a digital shout saying, "I am here, I am massive, and I am safe." To any observer, the Sanchi was invincible, a fortress of commerce that had tamed the wild ocean. 40 miles away, another shape carved through the dark. The CF Crystal, a bulk carrier loaded with grain from the United States, was heading south. It was a clumsy giant compared to the sleek Sanchi, a heavy beast of burden focused on its own timeline. The two ships were strangers in the night, 2 specks of light on a planet covered in water. The ocean was wide enough for 1,000 ships to pass without acknowledgement. The physics of the sea dictated that they should simply glide past one another, 2 separate worlds that would never touch. On the Sanchi, the officers watched the horizon. They saw the lights of fishing vessels, the distant glow of civilization, and the radar blips of other traffic. It was a routine puzzle of vectors and speed, a game they had played 1,000 times before. The coffee was hot. The logs were updated. The radio chattered with the static of distant conversations. There was no music playing, just the symphony of a well-oiled machine doing exactly what it was built to do. The radar screen continued its hypnotic circular sweep, painting the world in safety, unaware that the small, blinking dot on the periphery was not just another ship, but a synchronized clock counting down the final seconds of their lives. The distance closed. The math began to fail. The CF crystal was not altering course. The Sanchi held her line. In the final moments of the golden dream, the illusion of safety was at its absolute peak. The lights of the Sanchi blazed proudly, illuminating the white foam of her wake. The crew moved through the corridors, thinking about the end of their shift, about sleep, about tomorrow. The ocean outside remained flat and indifferent, hiding its teeth. The steel walls felt permanent. The night felt eternal. The distance is zero. There is no time to scream. The bow of the CF crystal, tens of thousands of tons of reinforced steel hammers into the starboard side of the Sanchi. It does not hit like a car crash. It hits like a tectonic plate shifting. The sound is ungodly. It is the shriek of metal being tortured, a high-pitched, deafening scream of rivets popping and steel plates shearing apart like wet paper. The Sanchi shudders, violently knocking men from their bunks, spilling the hot tea in the mess hall, and throwing the officers on the bridge against the consoles. The lights flicker. They die. Then the emergency red floodlights wash the bridge in the color of blood. For 3 seconds there is a pause, a false hope spike. The vibration stops. The CF crystal pulls back, scraping along the hull. On the bridge, a young officer grabs the railing, pulling himself up. He is breathing. The hull is breached, yes. The ship is wounded, yes. But they are alive. It is just a collision. Ships survive collisions. The captain shouts an order to check the damage. He reaches for the intercom, unaware that 3 decks below the friction of the tearing steel has already generated a single white-hot spark in a cloud of invisible gas. The condensate wakes up. It does not burn. It detonates. A shockwave of pure thermal energy obliterates the starboard side of the vessel. This is not a fire. It is a supernova born at sea. In a fraction of a second, the night ceases to exist. The sky turns a blinding magnesium white, brighter than the noon sun. The explosion is so violent, it shakes the windows of houses on islands miles away. On the Sanchi, the atmosphere itself turns into a weapon. The air temperature on the deck jumps from 10 degrees Celsius to 800 degrees in a single heartbeat. The paint on the railings doesn't peel, it vaporizes. The glass windows of the bridge blow inwards, not from the pressure, but because they simply melt into liquid silica. There is no escape. There is no time to launch a lifeboat. There is no time to put on a life jacket. The safety of the ship, the corridors, the cabins, the engine room instantly transforms into a convection oven. The clock on the wall of the crew's mess melts into a Salvador Dali surrealist nightmare freezing time at the exact moment the 32 souls are converted into ash. The ocean recoils. The heat is so intense that the water around the hull begins to boil. The Sanchi is no longer a ship. She is a torch. The flames shoot 1 kilometer into the sky, a pillar of fire visible from space. The toxic smoke, thick and poisonous, wraps around the vessel like a shroud, choking out any remaining oxygen. The CF crystal, battered and burning at the bow, manages to pull away her crew, watching in paralyzed horror as the world in front of them dissolves into fire. They see the silhouette of the Sanchi tilting, consumed by an inferno so bright it hurts to look at. The silence of the ocean returns, but it is now the silence of a grave. The radio calls go unanswered. The AIS signal stops. The Sanchi begins her drift, a burning ghost wandering aimlessly through the dark, carrying a crew that is already gone. For 8 days, the Sanchi refused to die. It became a grotesque monument to human failure, a flaming ghost ship drifting uncontrollably across the East China Sea. It did not sink immediately. Instead, it embarked on a slow, agonizing funeral procession pushed by the currents from Chinese waters toward the Japanese coast. It moved like a zombie dead, but animated by the inferno raging in its belly. This was the phase of the betrayal. The world watched on satellite feeds. Families in Iran waited for phones that would never ring. The official reports spoke of rescue operations and fire suppression. But the brutal reality was physics. The condensate was not just burning, it was creating a chemical exclusion zone. The smoke was not merely soot. It was a toxic cloud of hydrogen sulfide and carcinogens that blinded sensors and choked engines. The scale of the response was biblical. 13 vessels from China, South Korea, and Japan converged on the burning giant. They were the finest engineering marvels of the maritime world, firefighting tugs with high-pressure water cannons capable of shooting over skyscrapers. But against the Sanchi, they were toys. The water they sprayed evaporated before it even hit the deck. The steel hull was glowing cherry red, radiating heat so intense that the plastic visors on the rescue helmets softened if the crews got too close. The ocean, usually the extinguisher, had become the fuel. The condensate leaking from the hull turned the water surface itself into a burning lake, trapping the ship in a ring of fire. Then on January 13th came the moment of the resurrection. The wind shifted. The toxic plume cleared just enough for a suicide mission. The Shanghai Salvage Bureau sent 4 men, elite engineers wrapped in heavy thermal suits, onto the stern of the burning vessel. Zoom in. Forget the massive fireball. Focus on the boots of the lead rescuer hitting the deck. The steel was warping under his feet, groaning like a dying animal. The air temperature was 89 degrees Celsius. They had minutes before their respirators melted. They were not looking for survivors that hope had evaporated days ago. They were looking for the truth. They moved through the charred skeleton of the bridge. Everything was ash. The complex computers, the captain's chair, the family photos all erased. They found the voyage data recorder VDR, the black box. It was scorched, but intact. And then they found the crew. Not all of them. Just 2 bodies frozen in time on the lifeboat deck. They were not burned. They were mummified by the heat statues of grief left behind in the chaos. The rescuers had to make a brutal calculation, take the box, take the 2 bodies, and leave the rest. The ship was groaning louder. The explosions were restarting. The VDR sat in the rescuer's bag, a small, bright orange cube ticking quietly, holding the only digital memory of the 30 men left behind in the fire. The team retreated. The window closed. On January 14th, the Sanchi finally surrendered. A massive explosion ripped the bow apart. The ship tilted vertically, looking like a tombstone aimed at the sky. As it slipped beneath the waves, it hissed a massive cloud of steam rising as the Atlantic-sized fire was finally quenched by the Pacific depths. It took the remaining 29 bodies down, with it settling 115 meters deep on the ocean floor. The resurrection was over. The investigation began. The fire is out. The smoke has long since dissipated into the jet streams of the atmosphere. The cameras have packed up, the journalists have flown home, and the world has scrolled past the headline. But to say the Sanchi disaster ended on January 14, 2018 is a lie. The sinking was not an end. It was a transition. When the Sanchi slipped beneath the waves, taking 29 souls and thousands of tons of volatile chemistry with it, it did not disappear. It became something else. It transformed from a vessel of commerce into a permanent festering wound in the biology of the Pacific. The invisible stain history remembers oil spills in black and white. We remember the Exxon Valdez or the Deepwater Horizon because they were visually traumatic. We saw the blackened beaches, the dying pelicans coated in tar, the thick sludge washing up on pristine shores. Those images demanded our outrage. They gave us a villain we could see and a mess we could try to clean. The Sanchi offered us no such comfort. It was the first major condensate spill in history, and it revealed a terrifying truth about our modern chemical reliance. The most dangerous killers are the ones you cannot see. Condensate does not float like crude oil. It does not sit on the surface waiting to be scooped up. It is a phantom. Upon contact with the water, it fractured. Some of it evaporated, poisoning the air for miles. But the rest dissolved, mixing with the seawater to create a toxic, invisible plume that sank into the water column. This was not a stain. It was a sterilization. The East China Sea is one of the most vital fisheries on the planet, a nursery for millions of marine lives. The Sanchi didn't just coat them in oil. It chemically annihilated them. The toxic plume drifted silently, a translucent cloud of death, killing fish eggs, larvae, and plankton, the very foundation of the ocean's food chain. It was a massacre at the microscopic level. There were no photos of dead birds to rally the public, only a silent, vast emptiness where life used to be. The ocean did not bleed black. It simply went sterile. The abyssal tomb. Now let us descend, 115 meters down. The pressure here is crushing over 11 atmospheres, enough to collapse a human lung in seconds. Here lies the corpse of the Sanchi. It rests on the seabed, a twisted cathedral of steel wrapped in eternal darkness. It is no longer a machine defined by horsepower or knots. It has become geography. The hull, once painted in bright industrial colors, is now shedding its skin, rusting into the silt. Inside this steel tomb, time has stopped. If you could survive the pressure and shine a light into the corridors, you would see the artifacts of a life interrupted. You would see a coffee cup, miraculously unbroken, resting on a table that is now bolted to a floor, tilted at a chaotic angle. You would see the unrecognizable remnants of the bridge where decisions were made that cost everything. And you would be in the presence of the 29 men who never came home. They are not missing. We know exactly where they are. They are trapped in the iron belly of the beast that killed them. The families in Iran and Bangladesh do not have graves to visit. They do not have headstones in a sunlit cemetery. Their memorial is a set of GPS coordinates in the middle of a hostile ocean. The pressure of the deep preserves the tragedy. It holds the ship in a cold, crushing embrace, ensuring that the Sanchi remains a monument to the moment the technology failed. The complicity of comfort. Why does this story haunt us? It is not just because of the fire. It is because the Sanchis was not carrying weapons or drugs or contraband. It was carrying the lifeblood of our civilization. The condensate in its hold was destined to become plastic. It was destined to become the dashboard of your car, the casing of the phone you are holding right now, the fibers of the polyester shirt on your back. The Sanchi was not on a rogue mission. It was running an errand for us. We live in a world where we demand instant energy, cheap materials, and seamless logistics. We expect the lights to turn on, the packages to arrive, and the fuel to flow. But we have divorced ourselves from the brutality of the process. We see the product, but we do not see the ship burning in the night. We do not hear the screaming of the steel or the silence of the crew. The Sanchi is the receipt for our modern life. The global maritime network is a precision watch ticking perfectly 99% of the time. But when the gears slip, the cost is biblical. The Sanchi proved that our unsinkable systems are fragile constructs of ego held together by welding lines and radar blips. It proved that no matter how advanced our technology becomes, the ocean is still the apex predator. We are merely guests crossing its surface, allowed to pass only until the moment the water decides otherwise. The final echo. In the years since 2018, the currents have shifted. The toxic plume has diluted into the vastness of the Pacific, metabolized by a planet that is indifferent to our mistakes. The rust is slowly eating the name Sanchi off the stern of the wreck. But the echo remains. It resonates in the emptiness of the dinner tables in Tehran. It resonates in the sterile patches of the East China Sea where the fish have not returned. And it resonates in the quiet anxiety of every sailor who watches a radar screen at night, knowing that a single blink, a single miscalculation can turn a floating city into a drifting hell. The ocean has digested the steel. It has claimed the men. But the question remains drifting like smoke on the water. Next time, when the radar fails and the physics turn against us, who will pay the price? History is not just dates and numbers. It is the collective memory of our species. Thank you for taking the time to remember these events with us. If you have a story or an event you believe deserves to be told, leave it in the comments. We are listening.